Hai, Assalamualaikum. Anda sedang menonton Last Lap, corner terakhir, corner baring di Sinar Harian dan Sinar Daily. Where are we on the world stage? There were times that many great nations rose out of poverty because of strong leadership in the world arena. Dan ini bukan perkara baru dan terasing. Banyak perkara ini dilihat di Afrika, di Asia, malah di Amerika Selatan. Saya ingin kongsikan satu kisah ketika saya mula menjadi wartawan di tahun 90-an dahulu. Malaysia sudah mula melebarkan sayap diplomasi ke Afrika. Kita ada kunjungan diplomatik, kita ada kunjungan tentang perdagangan dan media Malaysia juga bertapak di sana. Saya pergi ke satu tempat yang begitu jauh, 2 jam, 2 to 3 hours drive on a dirt road. It was a salt mine. It was very hot. You know, if you're from from where I was born, the rice bowl of Peninsula, during musim kemarau, you can see tanah itu merekah. Macam itulah merekahnya orang paling tua pelombong garam di Afrika itu. Muka dia merekah-rekah kerana setiap hari mereka bekerja 12 jam di bawah terik mentari dengan gaji 5 sen. Saya pergi ke sana, mereka tak tahu berbahasa Inggeris, tapi mereka tahu sedikit bahasa Perancis. Dia pegang saya begini, orang tua itu. Lepas tu dia tepuk macam ni. Malaysia, ada bendera kecil Malaysia di bahu saya. Dia kata Malaysia. Macam ni dia buat. Dan dia kata Mahazir. Maknanya apa? Bukan kita di sini nak menyokong pejuang atau GTA. Kita nak berjuang bahawa pada satu ketika, nama Malaysia begitu harum di persada dunia. We are very, very high in international standing and repute. Where are we now? Saya akan minta bantuan anda. Anda boleh masukkan komen-komen anda di media sosial. Tapi saya juga akan minta kepimpinan fikiran oleh Profesor Madya, Dr. Roy Anthony Rogers, paling hujung sekali dari Institut Asia Eropah, Asia Europe Institute. He is the Deputy Executive Director, orang nombor 2, orang hebat. Dan tapi lama saya berbual dengan Prof. Madya sejak mungkin awal kurun ini tentang pelbagai isu antarabangsa. Dan yang baru saya kenali, anak muda hebat Malaysia yang melihat pada soal international relations and issues, Farlina Said, from, of course, the think tank that we all have grown to respect since a long, long time ago, ISIS Malaysia. She's the senior analyst. So I'm just going to go straight to it. Roy, I never thought that would happen to me in the deepest reaches of Africa, where people were so poor. And if we look at one of the surveys done recently for GE15, it is said that was the last criteria asked. International relations, only 9% respondents say is important for this PRU15. So I want to ask you, I have not seen any country in the world that can improve their people's plight, their own economic or development standing without working with the international community, either for technology, either for security, or for anything else. So I want to ask you that, where are we and how should we look at GE15 on that?
Well, thank you very much, Kamarul, of course, and also to Sinar Daily for this kind invitation. When it comes to the general elections, of course, general elections is a domestic issue where people in the country choose their leaders. So it has been a trend, even in the case of Malaysia, that domestic issues comes in as the main issue being debated, and it is manifested also in this is proven in their manifestos, right? But eventually, I believe, perhaps maybe not in these general elections, but coming general elections, political parties may consider seriously to include issues on Malaysia's foreign policy, Malaysia's stand in international arena, because we already have been there all this while, right? But to include that a component in the manifesto.
Where are we from the international community point of view?
I think I must say that the international community still have the respect and towards Malaysia.
Okay.
I just came back recently from South Caucasus,
Okay.
the South Caucasus region. I was in particular in Baku, in the city of Baku, which is the capital city of Azerbaijan.
Okay.
I interacted with the locals, and when I say I'm from Malaysia, they know where's Malaysia,
Okay.
and you can imagine that is South Caucasus,
Okay.
right? Okay, let me give an example. For example, during the period when we was facing the pandemic, COVID-19, I think the foreign ministry, our foreign missions have done a wonderful job to bring back Malaysians. I think as much as we think that it's a simple process,
Yeah.
but obviously we must garner support and respect from the respective countries
Okay.
to facilitate
Yeah.
this process.
Okay.
So in that sense, we are working based on the image that we already established, and
Okay.
people still uphold to that.
So largely it's still good. Cuma Farlina, diplomasi masa zaman sekarang ni not just track 1 or track 2. It's not just about PTDs or diplomatic officers. And we've seen how trade and diplomacy has been so intertwined. And otherwise, why are we talking about US versus China, sort of the new Cold War in trade? But saya nak pergi lebih mudah daripada itu. Kadang-kadang sekarang bila kita lihat media sosial, ramai yang sudah kembara keluar negara, kecuali COVID lah. Dan mereka berkata bila kita boleh tengok posting tu, kerana mereka akan terkejut bila, you're from Malaysia? Why is it? But the moment kita kata Thailand, Singapore, or we in between? Adakah itu masih lagi di kurun ke-21 dengan semua kejayaan Malaysia pernah tempa sewaktu krisis di Bosnia? Nama Malaysia yang berada di tengah itu. Sewaktu kita melihat pada pergerakan berkecuali lain, kita melihat pada Commonwealth atau Cogam, Malaysia yang paling kuat bersuara dalam banyak perkara. Tapi seolah-olah sejak kebelakangan sini dan dengan naiknya media sosial sekarang, kerana itu tidak lagi dilihat menjadi satu tunjang, seolah-olah the discourse and the perception is Malaysia is no longer right up there. Bagaimana pandangan Farlina?
I would actually have to agree. I think sometimes when I actually take a walk, let's say in a foreign country, and then you were to actually just speak to somebody who's actually probably from the grassroots, a shack perhaps in Korea,
Okay.
then you would actually say, "Oh, I'm from Malaysia." Sometimes they would actually know, but sometimes they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, I have actually had the experience that you had when I
Okay.
actually walked in the streets of Japan, and actually ended up in this shop by the roadside,
Okay.
and they point there's Mahathir's picture actually
Okay.
hung
Wow.
in the shop.
Nice. Yeah.
And it's actually a very interesting experience. So I think it's actually quite tied to the picture you painted, which is some parts of international relations actually personality driven. And you actually need a personality who has an
Okay.
idea about what they want to do
Okay.
on the international stage.
Okay.
And they're actually willing to put a lot of the apparatus
Okay.
in place for you to actually make it happen. For
Okay.
instance, the experience that you had in Africa,
Okay.
that actually comes from a history of our engagements perhaps in the Commonwealth, where we
Yep.
were actually quite adamant about things like anti-apartheid.
Yep.
And we actually said this is what Malaysia believes, and this is what Malaysia believes on the international stage.
Yeah.
So this is actually what we should stand for, and this is actually the identity that we should promote. So I think those type of things, when it unites together, it has to meet with practical plans of action.
Okay.
Like that's why you actually have your cultural diplomacy, or you have
Okay.
your soft power
Yeah.
type of engagements that can introduce.
Apa pun pandangan kita, hakikatnya, saya mungkin salah, tapi kalau anda, sama ada dalam ahli politik atau luar, nampak ada perkataan international relations ke hubungan antarabangsa dalam mana-mana manifesto, tolong hantar kepada Last Lab. Tapi itu hakikatnya. Dan kalau kita lihat, strong man personality or strong woman personality leader ni, kalau kita lihat dalam ASEAN, Presiden Jokowi pergi ke Rusia, pergi ke Ukraine, dan beliau menggunakan kapasiti sendiri, bukan kapasiti PBB atau sebagainya. Jadi, adakah itu contoh di mana kita dah terke belakang, Roy?
Yeah, memang if you say strong man or the idiosyncrasies, it does influence the foreign policy of a state. But I always believe that also the country is not built solely because of the idiosyncrasies of the leadership, but it requires the bureaucracy and things like that. Malaysia has been, promoting its foreign policy through the various prime ministers that we have. So, and I hope that this will continue in future.
Farina, tengok dia macam mana?
I think so. as mentioned by Dr. Roy, there are actually very interesting things about. You have many vehicles kan to actually communicate with other countries. That's your bureaucracy, and you actually have your public sectors and things like that. I think something that you actually mentioned that's quite interesting is about how some of these leaders are actually able to match their macam international vision, and then they actually match it with local domestic strategies. For instance, Singapore actually does an International Cohesive Societies Conference. And what does that actually do for the country? What does that actually portray to the international community when they're actually looking, when they're actually saying we are a multicultural nation, and this is how we've actually been approaching this issue, and this is how we manage it. So either you adopt our framework or you actually adopt how we do things. But what is the message that they managed to tell the world? They managed to tell the world, yes, we are multicultural, and this is how we're actually approaching most of these harmony aspects of things.
Falina, saya nak tambah pada situ kerana sidang kemuncak G20 tu, the G20 Summit in Bali. Rakan-rakan saya dah tua, jadi adalah kawan-kawan dekat Indonesia ni yang juga wartawan dan ketua mengarang, editor sebagainya. Mereka hantar kat saya, apakah itu G20 dan apa maksudnya kepada kita rakyat Indonesia. Dan itu suatu perkara yang media dah mula buat di sana dengan banyaknya, kerana mereka tidak melihat bahawa hubungan antarabangsa dan apa yang nasib rakyat itu terpisah. Contohnya, dalam kumpulan 20 itu dia mengumpulkan banyak kuasa-kuasa besar dunia yang boleh mempengaruhi polisi dunia. Indonesia, negara beribu pulau, kenaikan paras laut akan memberi impak besar, terutamanya kepada rakyat miskin yang tinggal di tebing sungai dan di tepi pantai dan sebagainya. Itu mereka hubung dan gabung jalinkan. Tidakkah itu juga kita boleh lakukan? Kenapa tak ada dalam manifesto kita?
That is actually very true. And I think that's actually one part, the linkage. So even bila I think the manifesto, some parts of the manifesto, they actually say, okay, the things that they want to promote when it comes to Malaysia identity is like integrity. And I think that's tied to the other parts of the manifesto that they have. Correct. You have certain things about climate change, but climate change with disaster relief and things like that. So maybe that's where they would actually pursue if they were to do like bilateral relations.
So are we too much looking at now because of the political crisis? Kita tengok simptom, kita tak tengok sebab. Kita tengok banjir, musim banjir, kena tolong Taman Sri Muda. Tapi yang mengakibatkan banjir dan cuaca tak menentu ni krisis iklim. Itu kat kutub utara, kutub dengan Arktik dan Antartika tu yang mencair. Macam mana? Itu kita tak boleh kawal kalau kita tak ada hubungan dengan negara lain.
Satu lagi, kalau saya nak
teruskan,
tambah, saya percaya bahawa kerajaan mana-manalah harus merakyatkan konsep-konsep ataupun pengetahuan tentang misalnya ASEAN. Okey, jangan sebut hanya katakan G20. ASEAN yang mana Malaysia merupakan sebuah negara anggota, malahan Malaysia merupakan salah sebuah negara pengasas atau
tonggak
Kalau ditanya kepada rakyat jelata apa itu ASEAN, mungkin ramai tidak tahu. Sedangkan kita telah memainkan peranan yang sangat aktif dalam ASEAN, dan ASEAN banyak mempengaruhi dasar luar Malaysia. So pada pandangan saya, pengetahuan mengenai ASEAN perlu ataupun dalam atau penglibatan Malaysia dalam organisasi antarabangsa harus diberitahu secara umum pada pihak, dan mungkin harus masuk dalam buku-buku teks di sekolah.
Roy, saya nak tambah di situ. Cuba kita terjemahkan diplomasi. Bila kita pergi ke sidang antarabangsa yang akan menentukan bagaimana nak menyelamatkan bumi, contohnya di COP ke, di Paris ke, kenapa rakyat lebih dibomokkan dengan isu guna bahasa Inggeris ke, bahasa Malaysia ke dalam ucapan? Tapi apa yang disebut, kalaupun ucapan dalam Malaysia, apa yang disebut dan apa yang dipetik oleh pemimpin lain di dunia ni, itu tak pula dikeluar.
Ya, itu yang saya katakan. Yang penting adalah isi parti dan kesannya kepada rakyat umum yang harus disebarkan, diberitahu, dan pengetahuan tentang hubungan antarabangsa dan khususnya penglibatan Malaysia dalam hubungan antarabangsa. Informasi ini harus dirakyatkan untuk disampaikan kepada pengetahuan umum.
Okey, itu yang saya nak sambung ke Farina, kerana adakah itu cerminan bila keadaan tak stabil, kepimpinan dalam negara tak stabil, politik dalam negara tak stabil, nak tinggal Dewan Rakyat sekejap pun takut. Sekali kalau bunyi loceng tak sempat balik lagi, kalah undi majoriti dan sebagainya. Jadi bagaimana bila kita nak bersedia kepimpinan antarabangsa, sama ada untuk krisis iklim dan sebagainya. Kita nak konsensus. Sedangkan saya tak boleh terima bahawa bahasa ucapan menteri itu yang lebih penting daripada apa perjuangan kita nak menyelamatkan masa depan. Paulina boleh terima?
I think actually, so a few things that actually crossed my mind
Yeah.
when you
Sure,
actually
go
mentioned it. Yeah. So the first part I think is about the issue is that you have, I guess, the population that might actually be interested in very, very, very short-term issues.
Okay.
For instance, very living issues
Yes,
actually, like
okay.
cost of living,
Correct.
like inflation and things
Yeah.
like that. And then at the same time, you have to actually, you need a leadership that actually can make that linkage,
Yes.
or you need someone, either
Okay.
your education system, or you
Yeah.
actually need your
Betul.
think tanks or the media society to actually
Yeah.
build that linkage. Okay, these are the international engagements, and this is actually how it actually impacts every single life that you
Yes.
have. This is how it impacts the US-China, it impacts your Penang industries. This is how it impacts you.
Okay.
And I think when that happens, you can actually get the interest from the grassroots, because if we have manifestos that's actually written based on popularity and based on interest, on general interest, then it would be very difficult to...
Farina, can I just be devil advocate here?
Yeah.
Diorang ni, diorang marah cikgu bahasa Malaysia, mereka ni, mereka ada gerakan digital, sentiment analysis, menghabiskan wang yang banyak untuk membayar kontraktor-kontraktor yang ada AI lah, machine learning lah, dan gabungan data raya big data. Takkanlah mereka tak nampak perkara-perkara pokok yang mereka boleh gabungkan di antara kepentingan sekarang dan kepentingan masa depan. Saya bagi contoh, untuk menyelamatkan iklim, kita perlu kurangkan gas rumah hijau. Gas rumah hijau banyak dikeluarkan oleh kenderaan. Tapi polisi pengangkutan di Malaysia masih berteraskan setiap orang kena ada pengangkutan sendiri, naik motor ke, naik kereta ke. Kenapa? Zaman Tun Dr. Mahathir kali pertama jadi PM pun, kita bina 3 jenis kereta api berbeza. Monorail, lepas tu ada yang pergi Gombak, lepas tu ada yang dari Sentul. Dan 3-3 sistem berbeza dan tiket dia pun berbeza. Itu zaman Tun pun berfikir masa panjang. Waktu itu. Jadi itu soalan saya. Bukan sekarang ni saja. Kalau kita sentiasa, we keep on insisting that we saw fire in front of our eyes, we might not be seeing the tsunami that's coming in the future.
I'm actually a little unsure where the question is in that. But
the question is that if we keep on being populist all the time, not taking the hard decision needed, because pandemic needs a hard decision, climate crisis needs a hard decision, but the manifesto, like you said, many of it alluding to the current.
Yeah, that is actually the biggest problem, and I think that's the biggest worry of everyone when you actually look, especially when you can go outside and you can already feel the differences when it comes to climate crisis or the climate change, and it's actually quite a horrifying situation to be in. I think the stability, maybe because sometimes I can be very silver lining, right?
Yeah, sure. Go
The
ahead.
silver lining is that because your apparatus for international relations are banyak actually, so that's why you actually need the stability in one thing, either like you have to introduce a long-term policy and stick to it regardless of the administration, because administrations can change, the populace can change, but if you actually do the study enough and you can actually project it for the next few years, I mean, you can see the polar ice caps are melting, and then it's like so this is actually the projection, and this is what you should actually be able to pursue.
Go ahead.
You see, when we talk about international relations, traditionally it has always been associated with diplomats. But today, I believe, while diplomats are still important in international relations, in foreign policy, but it's not solely the domain of the diplomats. It has an impact for everyone. That's what I always tell the students. You see, when you graduate after 3 years, 4 years, you want to work in, say, Japan, or you want to work in China, you want to work in United States, or even Singapore. Obviously, we must have diplomatic relations, and it involves international relations. So international relations is not just now the domain of the diplomats per se, which is true, but it covers also daily life. But many of us, we do not know. You know, the phone that we buy is because we have diplomatic or trade relations.
Tujuan saya bawa ke situ juga adalah kerana kita ada undi 18 sekarang. Kita tak boleh kata kepada seorang rakyat Malaysia berusia 18, 19, 20, 21 tahun, hubungan antarabangsa ni bukan hak anda. Mereka yang lebih Google, cari ikut YouTube, tengok satu-satu sampai awal pagi, sanggup tidur 3-4 jam je sebelum pergi college atau pergi universiti. Kerana mereka minat isu-isu ni. Jadi, jika undi 18 sampai ke berapa, 6 juta orang dan sebagainya, ini tidak dilihat. Saya faham kita bukan macam Amerika. Any presidential race in America, they must make their stand known on the Israeli-Palestine issue dan sebagainya. Ya, foreign policy. Kita mungkin tak sampai ke situ, tapi ada banyak benda lain yang terkesan. Kerana kita, walaupun susah di sini waktu banjir, kita masih boleh tolong orang Palestin di Gaza. That's how social media works. Jadi soalan saya balik kepada Fralina. Kalau manifesto dan parti-parti yang dikuasai ramainya oleh orang-orang lebih dewasa berbanding di 18 tidak membawa aspirasi ini, how are they going to vote if they are so opinionated? Isu macam hak asasi manusia, human rights, is it just a domestic issue? Isn't it also an international humanitarian issue? Saya ingat lagi bila pagi baru ni kumpulan penting COP di Mesir, tetapi isunya tentang seorang aktivis yang berbelas tahun dah duduk penjara dan dia melakukan mogok, tidak mau air, tidak mau makanan. Sehingga wakil Amerika juga memberikan masa untuk cakap tentang perkara itu. It will come to our young, if it hasn't already.
I think that's actually a good prediction to have, that they would actually be interested and they would want to do something about it. So the missing component might actually be empowerment, which actually ties to what Dr. Roy was actually saying, that everybody actually has to be a vehicle, and when they have a vehicle, that's when they become interested in participating and they become the agents of change themselves. But I think that missing gap about the empowerment, it impacts so sometimes the cognitive understanding becomes like I guess they encounter the issue, macam they would actually baca, say, the issue about Israel and Palestine, be interested in it, be very heavily invested in it, but then at the same time, what can they do about it? And then at one point it actually stops. So human rights, like they're interested in human rights, wanting to participate more and actually wanting to contribute more, but what are the channels that they have to actually do that?
Right. Do you see this changing among your students, among people, international forum that you go to, younger voices asking for more?
Indeed. I mean, our students and even the youths, that's why we have what we call this first tier diplomacy, and then you have the second and third. You see, in the past, as I said, it was first tier diplomats, the official representative. Today, we have NGOs, INGOs, who participate, who wants to be part of this, although they may not be the official representative of the state. So they join various INGOs and they help out in humanitarian assistance and things like that. So Malaysia is moving towards that direction, all right? And therefore, as I mentioned in my first point, perhaps in the coming general elections, political parties may have one more section.
Like 16 and 17.
Yeah, 16 and 17, which also provide what is the party's approach in Malaysia's stand or foreign policy or international relations.
Saya faham, tapi kerana Farina ni paling muda antara kita semua, bro, kita lebih sikit. It's not too late. Who says that once you come up with manifesto, you cannot add an addendum to it? Even our constitution have addendums to it. Just say muda ke if you're watching. So, tapi saya nak balik kepada, if people do not know our policy intimately or our people intimately, that one figure, that one spokesperson for Malaysia matters. And it matters greatly. Satu sebab kenapa Indonesia semakin dikenali ramai seluruh dunia kerana bukan saja Pak Jokowi. Menteri ekonominya, menteri luarnya mengambil posisi dan menjadi rujukan. In that case, do you think that the choice, walaupun tak ada international relations atau hubungan antarabangsa dalam manifesto, tapi semuanya akan mengutarakan calon Perdana Menteri mereka. Dan dalam calon Perdana Menteri yang sudah dikemukakan, kalau Barisan Nasional secara rasminya kita lihat disebut bahawa Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri. Kalau Pakatan Harapan kita lihat bahawa Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Dan kalau GTA, kita terpaksa tengoklah mana dia pergi. Kalau PN, kita tahu Tan Sri Muhyiddin. Jadi, adakah itu juga harus kita lihat daripada perspektif where we are? our standing in the eyes of the world kalau inilah calon-calonnya, Roy.
Okey, seperti mana saudara Kamarul sebut, kita ada calon-calon yang bakal menjadi Perdana Menteri. Bagi saya, setiap individu yang saudara sebut ada kelebihan masing-masing. Ada pengalaman di peringkat antarabangsa masing-masing. Misalnya, Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob as the caretaker Prime Minister. During the few months where he became the Prime Minister, he had demonstrated his ability. Although he may not have previously held the portfolio as a foreign minister.
Okay.
But I believe that he, for example, he represented Malaysia in the UNGA.
Okay.
He has spoken in UNGA and ASEAN meetings. He met President Joe Biden in Washington, D.C. He visited Turkey. So he has his, I would say, his speciality or his credentials. Similarly, Tan Sri Muhyiddin and even Datuk Sri Anwar when he was even the TPM back in those days in the 90s. And he has a lot of support at the international level. So I would say they have their own specialty and ability. But time will demonstrate. You see,
Roy, just untuk pengetahuan penonton, saya follow jugalah rakan-rakan ketua pengarang dulu dan saya follow media sosial Datuk Seri Wong Chun Wai. Semalam dia tunjuk gambar dia peluk dengan Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Dia kata dia pergi luncheon yang ada 20 diplomat antarabangsa. So it does matter. Because if an anointed would be Prime Minister if PH wins, sanggup meluangkan masa ketika kempen untuk jumpa dengan 20 orang diplomat antarabangsa 20 negara. So, it matters.
Of course. I mean, I would say foreign missions, they always want to play safe, as much as they want to have close relation with the caretaker government, and also possibility of whoever who comes in on the 20th of November.
Yeah.
So this is how foreign missions will operate. Is it that?
Okay, Farina, dalam konteks itu, orang muda macam Farina dan ke bawah ni tentunya personality tu amat penting. Kadang-kadang dia orang tak nak pergi sekolah, tak suka pergi sekolah, hanya kena cikgu atau pensyarah atau Twitter. I don't know whether Prof. Mat Yah akan agree, but saya nampak macam tu. Kerana saya ada anak-anak remaja. Jadi, dalam kes itu, melihat pada calon Perdana Menteri dan isu hubungan antarabangsa ni, pandangan Farina. Kerana tidakkah karisma penting? Orang muda tengok tu tak?
I think the relation actually with the charisma and the personality is that you biasanya bila they have more charisma, you actually macam tahu what they actually standing on and then standing for. And then I think that's probably where you would actually know them a bit better. And then sometimes those are the aspects, those are the key takeaways because that's how you introduce the personalities. But I think voting, if the mindsets of the voters, if they're planning to actually vote with the intention, okay, if I vote for this candidate, it's obvious this candidate is going to give me, cost of living inflation, but also this candidate will actually carry me, carry my nation.
Okay, Falina, I'm going to force you to a corner now. Out of the 3 candidates yang saya cakap tadi tu, macam mana Falina tengok untuk hubungan antarabangsa? Roy dah cakap pasal Datuk Seri Ismail.
Yeah, I think, so Tan Sri Ismail actually has his experience and things like that. I think there are some other candidates that probably have their preferences. For instance, Anwar and his S7ers would actually, because you already said that he's actually had the meetings with the diplomatic missions and things like that. So I think those would play a role, but essentially what they would actually do is after they have actually come into office. I suspect that's where we would actually see more.
Saya nak gabung jalan, kita pergi rehat. Tapi sebelum tu saya nak satu hujah terakhir. Melihat kepada ASEAN yang Roy bangkitkan tadi. Jerubu. Tuntutan kat atas Sabah. Isu Rohingya. Laut Cina Selatan. Negara Cina tu kuasa besar. Kalau kita semua berpecah-pecah, susah kita nak berunding dengan negara Cina. Kalau saya lihat peta 9 dash line, Roy, dia dekat dengan negara kita berbanding dekat dengan negara Cina. Tapi itu pandangan negara Cina melalui sejarah dan sebagainya. Jadi bagaimana kita nak selesaikan jika kepimpinan antarabangsa dalam konteks rantau ASEAN seperti Roy katakan tadi. Takkanlah sampai bila kita nak bersedia habiskan beratus juta ringgit untuk keselamatan Sabah hanya kerana takutkan ancaman dari Filipina sedangkan dia negara tetangga. Jadi kita sama-sama boleh mengamalkan dalam negara masing-masing. Contohnya, kalau kita tak selesaikan isu Rohingya dan tolong Myanmar dalam konteks itu, pelariannya kita yang tanggung. Kemudian, kalaupun kita tak letakkan dalam manifesto, tapi calon-calon menteri juga yang cakap, oh kita kena halau orang ni balik, marah NGO dan sebagainya. Jadi isu politik juga, Roy.
Okey, kalau dikatakan sebagai, kalau kita ambil satu isu seperti mana saudara Kamarul sebut tadi, iaitu isu Laut Cina Selatan. Suka tak suka, salah satu cara untuk menyelesaikan atau untuk meredakan ketegangan adalah melalui Code of Conduct. Walaupun ramai yang mengatakan bahawa Code of Conduct ini telah pun dibincang sekian lama, belum lagi timbul apa-apa keputusan muktamad. Tapi pada pandangan saya, China sudah sampai satu masa China mesti bersetuju dengan Code of Conduct tersebut, kerana kalau tidak, negara-negara dalam tuntutan tersebut akan berasa terancam dan bimbang ke mana mereka akan untuk mendapat perimbangan.
Adakah itu memerlukan...
Ini akan mengundang penglibatan Amerika Syarikat dalam rantau ini. So, ini akan membawa kesan negatif kepada China. So, what I'm trying to say is, the Code of Conduct will bring more benefit, right, for China to agree, because if not, the claimant countries will have no choice but to seek balance from the United States.
Bolehkah kita bersatu kukuh begitu? Kerana negara China juga boleh pergi jumpa seorang demi seorang atau satu negara demi negara dan tawarkan pelbagai perkara.
Of course, but as I said that yes, of course they can do that. But what I'm saying, apa yang saya nak katakan di sini adalah Code of Conduct itu haruslah sekarang mendapat sokongan padu daripada negara China, supaya dia dapat diselesaikan sesama negara yang membuat tuntutan bersama China tanpa penglibatan pihak luar. At least like a family overcoming the dispute.
Soalan yang sama, Farina, kerana sampai bila rakan-rakan kita, our brothers and sisters in Sabah misalnya, have to worry. Nak pergi tangkap, cari nafkah sebagai nelayan pun takut dengan lanun lah, dengan lawlessness. Tapi kalau kita bersama dengan Filipina, majukan kawasan tu potensinya cukup besar. Jadi boleh tak kerajaan seterusnya?
Yeah. So some of the issues is actually many levels, and as I think you mentioned, there are things that you actually can sort domestically, which is actually empowering some of your agencies or actually finding new ways of engagement. But there are some things that's actually more contemplative, I think, on the ASEAN end, because I think it's about finding a solution for the ASEAN. I think there's some conversations even among the scholars about an ASEAN X as ASEAN minus X or ASEAN plus X in terms of how to solve some of these very difficult issues, because it affects the ASEAN centrality and how you view the ASEAN platforms being used.
Okay. Yeah. Kita kena rehat. We have to go for a short break for a few minutes. Tetapi saya nak jual supaya anda tak lari. Jangan lari kembali kerana kita belum betul-betul cakap pasal Borneo. Borneo ni besar. Malaysia ada Sabah dan Sarawak. Sarawak ni saiz Sarawak saja hampir sebesar Semenanjung. Mungkin tolak Negeri Sembilan ke contohnya. Tu campur Sabah. Dan mereka juga yang ada berpuluh kerusi untuk Dewan Rakyat. Dan ada manifesto yang menjanjikan sekurang-kurangnya nak bagi 35% pada Sabah dan Sarawak. Meaning, they are not just kingmaker. They are an integral part of us. Where are their voices? Kita ada wakil yang bukan saja cerdik, pandai tapi juga cantik dan lawa. Wakil Borneo untuk Sinar akan bersama kita untuk bagi suara sebelah sana dan isu sebelah sana juga dibincangkan di sini selepas ini.